G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. We'll have all the show notes and any resources mentioned in the cast on our website. In 2006, age 43, quit a mid-level management role at Telstra and with two other founders started a video tech company. Some of their 30 clients include Foxtel, the Australian government, including helping 2 Prime Ministers create videos for their campaigns, and the AVC, who they built the original iView player for. 14 years on, they now have a team of 90, 15 million in revenue growing 20 to 30% per annum and 4 offices across Australia, New Zealand, Sweden and the UK. Valuable professional development Christopher undertook was negotiating training during his MBA at INSEAD, the number 1 business school in Europe. Before stepping down as CEO in 2018, he put heavy focus on sales leadership, especially since none of the founders had these skills. Communication is key. You can never communicate enough. Christopher recommends employing people you like over someone with more skills, as nice people can be trained. He believes the hardest thing growing a small business is, when you are small, you are nimble and quick to pivot. As you get bigger, you need processes and structures. Find a way to handle your larger distributed team without losing your nimbleness. Advice he gives himself on day one is focusing on what is important, not urgent, and stay alert to what's changing in your broader market. Be ready to pivot in case it does, and it almost definitely will. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Christopher Stenhouse from INSEAD Media. Thanks for your time today, Christopher.
Nice to join you, Troy.
Let's tell the audience how we know each other. We both sit on an advisory board at Ratho Farm in the Central Highlands, beautiful Central Highlands of Tasmania. Do you remember how we met, or what's the connection there?
Well, not exactly, but I imagine it's well over 5 years ago because, as you say, it's my cousin Greg Ramsey who owns and runs Ratho, and it's a sort of golf colonial farm stay events business. And you'd already been working with him for quite a while on that, I believe, and also it was New Zealand Whiskey and a few other ventures.
Yeah.
And I wandered in to assist, and through that, you and I got to know each other.
Yeah, it's been great. We were meeting fortnightly. Now it's pretty much weekly, and I think it's a really valuable time to have you on the board there and work with Greg and I on the Ratho Farm Golf Resort and accommodation. Yeah. So today we're talking about your business, Switch Media. You're based in Sydney. So do you want to maybe tell the audience a little bit about Switch and what it does, how it makes money, and etc.?
Yeah. So we started officially in 2006. Switch Media, as you say, located in Sydney. We now also have a small subsidiary in Sweden. We're a software company, or software as a service, it tends to get called. And what we do is we provide online video services to largely broadcasters, publishers. It's a business-to-business model. And so if you're trying to imagine what it's like, if you're a Foxtel subscriber, for example, and you're watching Foxtel on your phone or your iPad or your PlayStation or what have you, even though it's labeled Foxtel, that's actually Switch Media.
Wow, okay.
And operate all that. We did similar things in the early days, helping the AVC set up iView. We also do a similar service, for example, for the Federal Parliament, Australian Federal Parliament. So there is, I think, 60,000 hours of the world's most boring content available for you to watch online there.
And that's your fault.
That's my fault. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even, if there's a favorite clip of yours that you like, and we have tools online. If you go to their website, you can download and save for posterity your favorite clip of Malcolm Turnbull or whomever.
Morrison with the coal, yeah. Yes,
absolutely. Some of those classic moments.
Yeah.
So, and because it's subscription as a service, in essence, there's monthly recurring revenue that comes from, it can be multi-year contracts that we sign up with broadcasters or government departments or these sorts of organizations, in return for which they have access to, we provide them a platform that they use. We build apps that they can use as well, but we provide all the back-end systems and the encryption and the transcoding of video files. And really, we manage the whole lot. They just give us the source content and say, go for your life, and then we make it work.
Great. And so you don't directly charge subscription to consumers, you're charging the businesses that you work with.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Great. And how did Switch Media start out?
Well, at the time this was about 2005. I was sort of a middle-level manager at Telstra. I'd previously been, I'd had a number of roles. I was a management consultant, and then I'd worked in various sort of sales and marketing and operational roles in a range of companies in manufacturing and electronics and infrastructure. Um, and it got to the point where I was interested in doing something else. And through Telstra, I'd got to know two other people. And the three of us came together to start the company. And we seemed like a very good blend in that one of the guys was very strong strategically with a good marketing bent. You know, he had more bright ideas before breakfast than I do in a lifetime.
I know the type. Yeah.
Yeah, he knew the industry well. I didn't really know much about broadcasting or media, and he also knew somebody who was technically very capable and strong, and worked also in the industry. And then I came in as, I guess, more just somebody who had a technical background, but was sort of sufficiently commercially astute that I could help build and run the business with them. So it seemed like three very complementary set of skills that came together.
Yeah. Great. And so 2006, how old were you when the business started?
I was 43 then, so I'd already worked through quite a bit of career, and I'd got to the point where I thought, well, there's nothing here that really appeals anymore. At that stage, I was, as I say, in middle management at Telstra, and it didn't appeal to me to be going further up the pole there.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a good opportunity to finally do something that I've always had an interest in taking on.
Great. And like with many of the guests I've spoken with so far on the course, your timing was impeccable 2 years before the GFC.
Yes, yeah. So that was a bit exciting. Unfortunately, we had a few key customers at that point that we'd already taken on, and so we hunkered down, battened the hatches, and basically managed to get through a bit like I guess everybody is trying to get through at the moment too.
Mm.
There are a few key. We weren't too out there, and we were in a position where we could keep costs under control until GFC worked its way through the system.
Yeah, great. And do you have any key numbers you can share with the audience to kind of illustrate the growth?
Yeah, well, obviously we started with nothing, and then over the course of what's that? It was about 10 years or so. It grew to about 15 million in revenue. It's sort of flattened off then, but for several years we were growing revenue at probably it was 15, 20, even 30% a year. Quite
Great.
consistent.
Wow. Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, team members and customers or sites?
Yeah, we grew to about 90 people by the time I stepped down as CEO in 2018. About 30 customers, I guess, all up, predominantly in Australia and New Zealand, a few in other countries now, also because of our Stockholm acquisition. So we bought a small organization based in Stockholm in 20. Actually, that was after I left as CEO. They bolted that on. It made sense because we found that there were lots of people in Europe who said, "Love what you do, but we're never going to do business with you until you've actually got a local presence."
Right.
And
Yep.
so, for that reason, now there's offices. We're in Sydney and Stockholm, but we now have our staff spread across Sydney and Stockholm, obviously, but also in New Zealand, Christchurch, and also in Manchester in the UK.
Great. And did the Manchester office, was that part of the Stockholm acquisition or natural opening?
That was part of it as well. In fact,
Yeah.
we sort of easy there. We had some people who were originally in Stockholm who said, "Well, actually, we'd rather be back in the UK,"
Yeah.
and that worked because that was also where some of the customers were.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And when was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
Um, that's an interesting one. I mean, I don't think that I actually ever did feel that. And I think often of, I think it was Andy Grove, who used to be the boss, and he founded Intel, who said only the paranoid survive.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I mean, that doesn't mean I wasn't enjoying it. I mean, I really was, and I would get thrills from various little milestones along the way. One of the early ones, in fact, our very first customer was the ALP. And so a little thrill of actually sitting down with Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard and helping them make YouTube style videos during their Kevin '07 campaign. I remember very clearly the first time I saw $1 million in the bank. I think I even took a photo of the screen.
Oh, wow.
And there are these different ones. When customers would say, and that was a real buzz. They would say, "You guys do truly amazing stuff, and the way you have managed yourselves and manage us is admirable." But there was also just the sort of feeling that we were providing. I mean, I felt I was succeeding when we were providing job security and contentment and professional development and fun, I guess, to more people ultimately than right fit into my living room.
Yeah, right. Great. And for those outside of Australia, the ALP's the Australian Labor Party, and Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard were both ex-Prime Ministers of Australia. So that's pretty senior stuff there, Christopher, helping people with YouTube-style videos.
Yeah, no, it was, well, we started at roughly the same time as YouTube, and they obviously have ended up slightly larger than we are.
Yeah, slightly.
Slightly different direction as well, but that was the time where we said this online video stuff is going to take off, and nobody quite knew in what way and how. So we were a chapter ahead of everybody else, which made us look like experts.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Great.
So
and what does success look like to you?
Probably largely what I was just describing. I think there's at the end of the day, I have got the greatest satisfaction, and for me that meant success, having employees who genuinely love what they do within a business that's profitable, because you want it to continue to exist. A profitable, self-sustaining business.
I think there's some really good points there: profitable, sustainable, and very importantly, which feed into both those points, but is having a great team, and secondly, the team loving what they do. I've found so much value transition from businesses that have actually got those three points aligned.
Yeah, very much.
And how did you fund the business?
With very small amounts of money. We were basically self-funded. We drew down on home mortgages. We delved into our personal savings. We got small loans from family members. And I find that makes you very efficient.
Yeah, other people's money who are very close to you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also just not having very much of it either. I mean, I think it's been interesting talking to some venture capitalists and others who have sort of said in their ideal world, they struggle with the way venture capitalism or private equity investors actually work, because very often there is this human nature that says if you are given a large pot of money, you have an inclination to spend it.
Yes.
And therefore they struggle trying to work. And that's why you have to put all these different benchmarks in to make sure that people are truly spending the money that these equity investors have invested in an efficient way. And when you grow the business, when you bootstrap it and off the smell of an oily rag, and you have no alternative, you are very efficient. And we were fortunate that we had a business that allowed us to do that. I found banks completely useless. I think banks are the kind of people who lend money to you at the moment when you actually don't need money lent to you anymore.
Yeah, fair weather lenders.
Yeah, very much, because they will go, oh, yeah, well, you're a viable entity now. How much money would you like to borrow? We found later on, and we'd say, well, where were you when we needed you?
Exactly. Yep.
So we were fortunate in that regard. It also just keeps you very well, because we were small. It keeps you dynamic, and you make really hard calls all the time. You do not have the luxury of trying both approaches.
And fast as well. You're quite nimble. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very.
Well, if you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
No, I don't think I would. Certainly not with the same value proposition. And I think there was a window of opportunity at the time, and and that's kind of just life. There, things do move on. I think um, there are still things to do in the media and entertainment space, and uh, that's something that the company is morphing into being able to address. But it would certainly be a very different sort of business that you would launch these days.
Yeah, right. And can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so far?
Yes, that was fairly early in the piece. I talked about the three of us who founded the entity.
Hmm.
So probably, and we thought we were, and we were very complimentary. But 2 or 3 years, it was probably 2 years into it, we ended up with quite a sort of profound disagreement on the future direction, and the business nearly fell apart then. And I would say the only thing that actually, well, not the only thing, but I think a major contributor to what stopped that happening and what saved us was the fact that we had a shareholders agreement. It's
Right.
something we had drawn up at the time, when we created the entity, which I cannot remember and not recommend strongly enough to others.
And it's a
Uh,
point, just to cut you off, sorry to cut you off. It's a point that a lot of people, and I've just mentioned this to a family relative who's looking at opening a second hairdressing salon with a new business partner, one of her staff, and she had no idea what the shareholders agreement was, and I outlined a few horror stories that I've been through and seen, and I cannot agree more. Having that shareholders agreement, which basically outlines if someone wants to leave or is asked to leave, or something really bad happens or something really good happens, someone comes along and wants to buy the business, how do you sort out or get everyone on the same page? So you can move forward in those decisions. Yeah,
yeah,
important to
and
be clear.
only time the best time to actually create those is in the beginning, when A, the business has no value, and B, you're all in love with each other, and
Yes.
therefore you're prepared to compromise and to write down those rules of engagement. And what you really want, as you do with any agreement, I mean, you want to sign this agreement and then put it in the bottom drawer and hopefully never need to draw on it.
Yeah.
The fact it's there was then a constraint, and then also a guidance when we hit those snags down the track.
And of the three founders, are all three still there, or this disagreement was catalyst for one of them leaving? Or
Yeah, one of them left, and left by way of the way we discussed in the shareholders agreement. So
yeah,
it actually worked as intended.
great. Okay, yeah, and uh, and we can edit this bit out if you don't want to talk about it. But was the and just out of interest, what was the sentiment? I guess as that exiting partner, were they generally happy because they'd agreed initially to the shareholders agreement the way it had been set up, or was it, they weren't overly impressed with the way things ended for them?
Oh, they were sad, but everybody recognised that it was actually the best outcome. It was the only possible outcome,
Yeah.
and I think it would have been just a lot uglier, or it could have even fallen over if we didn't have that guardrail and that guidance and that rule book that we'd all agreed.
Yeah, I agree because it's a hidden thing, isn't it? Like people don't recognize the noise and distraction of these internal disagreements or arguments can have on the value of the business. It can just drift sideways or go backwards while the founders are all, discussing these points.
Massively, yeah. I mean, if you need agreement constantly at the top, um, not only so you go in the same direction, but also that you demonstrate consistency to everybody else in the business. I mean, it's a bit like a child uh, wanting an extra ice cream and going to mum and not getting it, and then going to dad but getting it from dad, and starting to play people off against each other. And it's exactly the same in the business. If employees do not see consistency from the senior people, the business is not going to succeed.
Yeah, do not start me on that. My 7-year-old daughter, she lives across two households as my ex and mine, obviously, and she's become very crafty at negotiating and getting extra ice creams out of either one of us. So we're onto her now, but for a while, she's quite wily. And unfortunately, I'm just starting to teach her to play chess, and she's picked up. She's pretty good at strategic moves, seeing a few moves ahead. So I think we're in for a bit of trouble ahead of us.
All right. Yeah.
Um, and what area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Sales. I didn't have any experience in sales. I kind of had every other functional role in the company. And it was actually my biggest concern when we started, that I raised quite openly with my colleagues as well, to say, I haven't sold before. I've never been a salesman, and I don't know if I can do it. And when you are the CEO of a company, you're also, whether you like it or not, chief salesman.
Yeah, yeah,
And you're the front man. And certainly when you're small, well, I mean, customers always loved seeing the CEO. And
mm.
certainly when you're small, you've got no other choice. As it turned out, I actually found it really quite enjoyable and not that hard. I sort of found it like common sense, really. But I didn't realize that at the time, and never having done it before. And I think I started off life with a view that salespeople, I had a rather jaundiced view of salespeople. I thought I tended to think of them as you sort of used car salesmen, which is very
Yeah.
unfair. Only used, because there are probably lots of very thoroughly decent used car salesmen. But and I didn't realize, in particular in this space, it's very much a consultative selling requirement. But yeah, so that was something that was a big learning experience for me that I had to work on.
And you said one of your other two founders had a bit more marketing experience, but did neither of them have sales experience either, like yourself?
No.
Yeah.
One of them, the marketing guy, did. I mean, he called himself business development, but it was sort of it was a bit more of it was consistent with his strategic high level view of things. He would go, oh, well, I think, this will be a good pitch to those people. And he was quite right, it was. But then somebody needs to sit up late at night and get the formatting on the Word document right. And also needs to, negotiate the final little minutiae in the agreement with the client at the end and talk to them and what have you. So you need to be able to do the whole thing. You can do the schmoozing, and certainly when you're small, I mean, you can break into different elements of sales development when you're a bigger company, but not when you're
No.
small.
Yeah. And what have you enjoyed least about managing the fast growth?
The fact that you then end up being a bigger company. I think I have come very clearly to the conclusion that I like the smaller organization, because as you grow and you become a bigger company, you lose the extent of the personal contact that you have had with each colleague. And one of the things that sort of saddened me by the time I'd stepped out of the role was that I barely knew everybody in the company personally anymore. And that's inevitable. I mean, you're ambitious, you want your business to succeed and grow, and that's fine, and I'm not arguing with that. But that is one of the things that I find sad, that inevitably changes to some degree.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm the same. I've interviewed quite a few people with 50 plus, 50, even 100 more staff, and reflecting on it, I don't think I'd enjoy that for that exact reason that you just mentioned, the personal contact, the small huddle of teams. Yeah, I really enjoy that energy.
Yes. Yeah, very much. Yeah.
And what's been the biggest mindset shift in your small business growth journey?
Um, I think, and it's one that it was an early lesson I learned, and one that I kept very much in mind, and it's that the business you start isn't necessarily the business you end up running.
Yeah.
And you need to be ready for shifts. I mean, you need to have your radar on and aware of things happening in the market. I mean, we started a business that I thought was a bit of a curated YouTube sort of thing, whereby we would go out and get interesting content at that point from student filmmakers and animation studios and what have you, and we would put that up and we would get advertising to support that. And so I remember still as clearly as anything in the early days going around and pitching this whole story to different organizations to try to get them interested in it. And I can still remember the day the guy was sitting in the meeting and he listened patiently to me, and then at the end he said, look, yeah, he said, not really into that, but I think could you give us your platform, pull out all that content out, really don't like your content, and let us use the platform for our content. And suddenly I went, oh, so maybe that's the business.
Yeah, right. That's an interesting way to kind of find your product market fit, or what product you should be really honing in on. That's, yeah, great.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes back to making sure you listen to your customers, but also, the market, and every market changes rapidly, and that's why I say the product you launch may not end up always be the product that you end up developing and growing, and you need, I think at your peril, you don't remain open to the possibility that you need to shift.
Yeah, that's very good advice. What's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
I think for me, it was the fact that you need to make sure every day that you can recognize the difference between a task that is urgent as opposed to one that is important.
Mm. Is
But,
that Stephen Covey, I think?
oh, is it? I thought it was me. Oh dear, you
No,
original thought. Oh,
he's
I
got a
didn't.
matrix on urgent versus important, etc. Yeah, no.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Damn, I was going to write a whole business book on that.
I think
Damn.
I think it's in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a great book.
Oh, yeah, because I mean, the thing is, as the CEO, as the head guy,
Yeah.
you have use to work on anything and everything you like in the company, but I mean, you can't. And therefore you've got to focus on what's important, and not just the people who are whinging or moaning or the squeaky wheels or what have you. And also just making sure you don't gravitate to what you feel most comfortable doing or what you most enjoy.
Totally agree. Both those things are just such a drain on resources for a growing company, because our most precious resource, I believe, is our time, and therefore inherently from that, it's our focus and energy. So if these things aren't really important, dragging down, taking away your time, it can have a big impact on the progress of the business in the next year or two.
Yeah, totally.
And countering that as well is just the procrastination. Everyone procrastinates, so it's quite easy to do low value stuff that may appear urgent but not important, because it's more fun than sitting down for 2 hours with a coffee and working on that strategic document like your homework at university, don't really want to start.
Yep, absolutely. Very, very, it's just, that's life. But yeah, you need to constantly impose that discipline and ask yourself all the time, okay, did I do the important stuff today?
Yeah.
Or what is really important that I have to get through today?
Absolutely. Yeah. Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course, then add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager. And can you talk to how you added people to the team? Growing from 0 to 90 over 14 years is amazing growth, Christopher, because it would be good for the audience to hear any wins or mistakes or advice you would have on adding people to the team.
Yes, we made lots of mistakes along the way. Learn a lot from that. I guess for me at the end, it was, you should employ people you like, because there are a few givens. I mean, you're advertising for a particular role. There's the job description, the requisite requirements, skills, experience, what have you. You assume that is, they need those. Those are the tools that they need in order to function. But at the end of the day, especially when it's a small team, you need to want to be able to enjoy spending time with them, because you can't avoid them. It's not like in a big organization with like a dickhead and you can leave them on the other side in the other department. I mean, here you have to work with them. And we have made mistakes a number of times where we've looked at different people and we've said, well, we actually really like you, but unfortunately you don't have quite the experience that we think we need for this role. And so we're going to give it to that bloke who's got all the qualifications and all the experience. He's not as nice, but that'll be okay because he can obviously do the job. And I would say 9.5 times out of 10, that is the wrong decision.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. And what about when you added your first employee apart from the 3 founders?
Yeah, it's always difficult, those first ones, because suddenly your cost structure jumps massively. When you've got 50 people and you're adding 1, that's not as painful as when you've got 3 people and you're adding 1. Yes, you're quite right. And we had to do that pretty quickly. And, that was a bit of a deep breath gulp moment. And that was probably within the first 3 months, couple of months of starting, because there was just a lot of coding that needed to be done. And we couldn't just leave that with the technical guy.
Yeah, right. Yep. Great. And what are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
um, I don't know, actually. Oh, I actually think communication is key.
Mm.
Um, you think that you are saying enough, but you almost never are saying enough. And as it grows, you need to keep the place aligned and well oiled. And the only way you can do that is to keep them all informed. And you need to be communicating constantly and in different ways. Some people like to read, some people like to hear it. They like a presentation to you. Some people you have to talk to face to face. It's repeating yourself in different ways to different people. For me, that's as key as it grows, because you no longer have this godhead of a small group that kind of implicitly understands what needs to be done. Without meetings, you have to just you have to keep everybody, as the business grows, aligned. And
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Christopher. One of my sayings is communication is the key to any relationship. And I'll use one of Peter Drucker's quotes, which is communication is what the listener does. So that implies that me communicating to someone, it's my responsibility to make sure that they hear or get the entire message that I need to convey. And often we can just be so busy or so self-absorbed, we forget that the rest of the team is sitting around wondering, there's been a change in direction or strategy and they haven't really been fully informed or on an ongoing basis. So it's absolutely our responsibility as the head cheese to make sure that communication is consistent and frequent enough with good cadence to it.
And you have to repeat it, because the trouble is, everything about the business,
Yeah.
and there's a natural tendency to think, well, I know it, doesn't everybody know it?
Yep.
Is that obvious from the way I'm conducting myself and things we're doing? But no, it isn't obvious. And you think that just because you said it last week, that's good enough. It's not.
Exactly. Yeah.
To say it again this week and probably next week as well.
And I also think the way that we're wired, often business owners / entrepreneurs, we think, well, I've said it once, why do I need to say it again? Let's get on with the next thing, people. Whereas everyone's different, everyone works at a different pace, and taking that communication in. So yeah, that's a really good point. What about professional development? Did you invest much in yourself over the years?
Yes, probably beforehand. Probably because I came at this late. Everything had been done beforehand. So um, because I started off, I did economics, I did an MBA. I mean, that to me was particularly useful. And then being able to put that in practice, my first job after that was as a management consultant. So
your MBA, that was INSEAD in France?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. What a place to do an MBA.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was the best year of my life. It doesn't mean everything's been downhill ever since, but that was extraordinary in terms of the stimulation and the challenge and the opening of one's eyes as to possibilities and differences and different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a great set of skills and tools, I guess, that you had in your kit bag, covering, all those functional areas like sales and marketing and operations and finance, and also organizational behavior.
Yep.
I would say probably in hindsight at Switch, we didn't do enough management training, and I think that was a failing. And I would have to say that I realized through my time at Switch that the single two most important elements of training are organizational behavior. So those soft things about how people interact and how you motivate.
Yep.
Negotiation analysis. Because at the end of the day, I got very excited about accounting and finance and all these skills I had. But if you're the general manager, at the end of the day, you can always employ experts in finance or operations or sales or marketing. What you need to do as the CEO is to bring all this together. And the only way you can bring all that together is if you have the emotional intelligence and the skills and the ability to recognize that different people are motivated in different ways and need to be talked to in different ways. And I remember as a MBA student, we all laughed at that, all this sort of soft science stuff. I mean, that was all woolly. Give me a good discounted cash flow that I can sink my teeth into. That is the single most important thing that came for me out of training and understanding, and that and negotiation analysis. And I think people underestimate that too, because that's something that's important not only in a commercial environment where you are obviously negotiating with suppliers, with customers, with your own staff. I mean, you negotiate, whether you think of it or not, your whole life. I mean, you negotiate with your partner as to who's going to empty the dishwasher, and there are all sorts of things where it becomes important. And for me, probably, that was probably one of the best courses I ever did, to understand that there is a structure that some of us gravitate to naturally or implicitly, or others don't. But as soon as you're made aware of it, and that there's a way the human mind works and interactions,
you can adapt your communication style.
Yeah, that allows you to negotiate something that works for everybody.
I think that's a really valuable point, Christopher. Negotiation. You're right. A lot of business is that as the leader. So I think anyone should consider investing some time in that professional development, whether it's a great course on it, like you mentioned, or books, or just even some more reading up on it. Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess on that, have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
No. And I don't know why. I don't know how it is. I mean, I would have to say that would have been helpful. It didn't actually occur to me at the time, and I didn't particularly miss it either, I don't think. But in hindsight, I would have to say, well, that actually could have been quite useful. So no, I have no insight actually to offer on that particular point.
What about a board of directors or advisors?
Yeah, we do have a board of directors. It's fairly well. It's probably more a board of advisors, an advisory board, really, where we have the key operational exec team in the company, and we actually only have one external party. But I think it would be better if we had probably at least one more.
Yeah,
I mean, value of having that impartial person who is not buried in the weeds and can stand back and go, well, hang on, why haven't you done that, or why haven't you even thought about doing this? That is invaluable. And that's, perhaps that over the last, we've had that for probably only the last 6 years or so, but that's been invaluable. So in some degrees, that it's not quite mentoring or coaching, but it was at least an external, a more dispassionate sounding board that has kept us honest.
Yeah, I interviewed David Wise last week from SFM Hydrawood here in Tasmania, and the Hydrawood subsidiary harvests wood from the depths of a Lake Pyman here in Tasmania. And he mentioned, when I asked about this question, he said they had independent come on the board, and he said, just going through the simple exercise, he asked about the business. Here are the three parts of your business: consulting, managing forests, and value adding via their own wood products. And the independent asked, right, so where's all the noise? Where's all the costs? And they said, oh, consulting. Okay, and where's all the profits being made? Well, it's the other two divisions. So they quite quickly shut down the consulting arm fairly soon. But they were just so busy building the business and not really stopping and looking at the numbers or thinking strategically. So it's good to have someone to poke holes in your logic, or even just say, hey, can we just have a look at this report? I want to check some numbers, and maybe it's not worth us, doing that product or division anymore.
Yes, very much. I absolutely agree.
Now, before we get into the final 5 questions, you exited the business operationally, not as a shareholder. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you stepped out of the role, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. In my final year as CEO, we actually went through a process where we'd been approached by a Canadian company that specializes in buying software businesses. And so we went through quite a detailed process that really went up to almost a sale. And in the end, it just didn't happen because we couldn't agree on a price. And I think probably just because we didn't want to sell as much as they wanted to buy.
Yep.
So in some ways it was disappointing, but in some ways, we were quite happy to press on as well. What we've now put in place is an employee share plan that progressively transfers equity from the existing shareholders over to the current management team. And in fact, broader than the management team, it's pretty much to all the employees of the company, based on the profitability of the company each year. And I would really recommend putting something like that in place, because it has two effects. It sort of incentivizes your colleagues to act increasingly as owners. They have an increasing incentive to see the business be successful. And it provides an avenue for existing shareholders to slowly exit in the absence of a big sale of your business to someone else. It doesn't stop that at all, but it gives you another avenue. And it also provides, I guess, the third thing, it provides a succession planning incentive for yourself as you start to move out of the business.
Yeah, absolutely, Christopher. I agree. Episode 16, I interviewed Stephen from Vanguard. They were also a software company, started in 2006 in Sydney, like yourself. And they grew to about 88 staff when they listed on the ASX. I think it was 2015. And sales by that point were 12 million. But they instituted a employee share scheme a few years earlier, and he said that was one of the powerful reasons they were able to grow so fast and then list on the ASX. And highly profitable. Yeah. All right. One of the final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
I think there's sort of a dead patch that one has to worry, in that when you're small and you are nimble and you're basically you don't even need meetings, you're so small, and you are incredibly quick to pivot, to respond, to get back to a customer, to solve a problem. And that's great. When you are a company, well, you don't even have to be the size of BHP or Telstra or something. I mean, you can move mountains, but it takes a long time. And there are so many processes involved in doing so. And getting from one to the other, and again, you don't have to get quite that big. You have to be careful how you get through that patch when you're no longer that small, but you actually are big enough that you start to need processes and structures and a way to handle your larger distributed team without losing your nimbleness. I think that's probably one of the hardest things for people. People need to be aware of that and to think how the right way to do that and get guidance on the right way to do that for their organization.
And also the challenging thing through that growth is obviously the business goes through not just different sizes, but needs. It's going to need different types of people in different corners of the business. So having the people are going to transition in and out of the business, and that's, can be painful and a sad thing as well, to say goodbye to people if they just don't have a certain role is needed, or they can't grow in any further.
Yes, that is very true too. Yep, and but so long as you're treating them fairly and openly, and they understand. I mean, we lots of parting of the ways for that reason too. But they will understand. We've had very few, almost none, that were parting in bad blood.
Yeah.
People understand. They might have been sad, but they understand that they change, or the business changes, and the business needs something different, or they need something different.
Yeah, yeah. And favorite business book, which has helped you the most?
None. I don't read business books, which is probably a bad thing. But no, none at all that I can think of.
That's all right. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for professional development?
No, again, I'm pretty hopeless there too. I have to say. I will be tuning in much more regularly to yours here now.
Thank you. I'll send you Stephen's cast. Was that one of the ones you listened to?
Was that last week's?
No, episode 16 is about 5 weeks ago. I'll send it to you. It was the 2006 they started SaaS business, listed on the ASX. I think you'd enjoy that one. And meeting Stephen one day in Melbourne.
Very good, yeah.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Well, this will probably make you smile, or maybe you'll agree, but I think a robust cash flow forecast is absolutely crucial.
I'm going to agree with that. You and I have our own cash flows at Ratho, which we both enjoy. We revel our time in that.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot overstate the importance of them. I mean, I forget what the statistics are. They say something like 90% of businesses that start fail.
In the first
And
5 years, yeah.
yeah, because they run out of money, and unless you can forecast the likelihood of you're doing that and when, you will probably run out of money. Even the best run businesses have mismatches between inflows and outflows unless you're completely across that and you have a robust way of updating that regularly. You're going to be in doo-doo at some point.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not even just a matter of the business not having an underlying viability, i.e. it's profitable and you don't know those numbers, but there are cases where people have actually had a good, genuinely profitable business, but they mismanaged their cash flow.
Yep.
And went under. So it's twofold. If you don't manage that cash and see where the troughs are coming, or you aren't clear on what your variable costs are and your overheads and know what your break even is, etc., you could just be on a fool's errand.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, we are fully in agreement on that one, Troy.
Yeah.
Great experience jointly of that.
Yes. Yeah. And my favourite and the final question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Probably not anything beyond some of the things we've already covered, but I mean, to me, it comes back to sort of two of the important things, and that's that issue that we were touching on before about focusing on the important tasks, and not the urgent or preferred ones. And then also, just as the CEO, you have to stay alert to what's happening in your broader market and be ready to pivot your business if the wind changes, and it almost definitely will. And so you need to be, while you're very focused internally and you're talking to customers about what you want to sell them today, you need to still keep an eye out as to what's happening in the broader, wider space.
Yeah, totally agree. Really good advice. Well, thanks for your time today, Christopher. I think the audience got a lot of value out of what you shared with us, and congratulations to yourself and your founders and the wider team on the growth. That is phenomenal over 14 years. And also congratulations for exiting the business operationally as well over the last year or two. It's not an easy feat, one, to get a business past the 5-year mark, but two, to successfully extract yourself from the day-to-day. That's great.
Yes, yeah. For me, that was quite an achievement too, to be able to do that. That you had people that you had sufficient trust in, and passion that they can continue it in their own way.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for your time.
All right, good, Troy. No, it was a great pleasure. I enjoyed that very much. Thanks.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.